You heard Alberta's Premier earlier on carbon pricing and her government's speech from the throne. Let's get some analysis on both of those stories with Alberta columnist Graham Thomson. Graham, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this provincial pushback we're seeing on federal changes to carbon pricing. Scott Moe in Saskatchewan has so far taken the most drastic step with what he's telling Sask Energy to do about withholding or not collecting carbon taxes on natural gas bills. But of course, we're seeing opposition from other premiers, including where you are in Edmonton with Danielle Smith. So what do you make of what we're seeing right now between the federal government and these premiers?
Yeah, this is a gift. Political gift to Danielle Smith. Like, she's all about attacking the federal government. We saw her get really aggressive last year. She won the UCP leadership race, the governing party in Alberta, United Conservative Party. She won the leadership race on this very much this get at Ottawa all the time, taking this sort of page from Jason Kenney's playbook, the fight back strategy. Fight with the Alberta government against Ottawa. It gets kind of tiresome after a while, thinking it's a one-trick pony. The thing is, part of the fight is against the federal carbon tax, the price on carbon. And here, all of a sudden, you have the federal government stomping on its own carbon tax, of course, by giving this sort of tax holiday to Atlantic Canada when it comes to the tax on oil for heating homes. Now you've got Smith saying, well, look, we burn fossil fuels in Alberta, natural gas. Why don't we get a break? And it's not just her saying this now. You've got even the NDP, the opposition in Alberta, saying, yeah, hey, Trudeau, you just can't carve out these things for certain areas of the country. We deserve this kind of break too. So you have Trudeau actually having the Alberta NDP and the UCP, Danielle Smith and Rachel Notley, NDP leader, actually on side, I guess singing from the same page on the choir. So this is remarkable, and this is a real gift to Smith because it's not just her constantly fighting against Ottawa for no real reason. Here's a reason that people can get behind. Even the normal critics of Smith are getting behind her.
And we did have Premier Smith telling us earlier she does want a political solution on this, but also hinting at perhaps another legal reference over federal carbon pricing. She's saying she's willing to test it. So we already have this tension between the Trudeau government and the Smith government over energy. Where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, I know she's talking now about the Sovereignty Act. This is an issue she brought up last year in the UCP leadership race. She brought in the Sovereignty Act. The roots of the Sovereignty Act, those who actually helped write it, it's all about being unconstitutional and fighting the federal government, ignoring federal laws. Now, Smith is trying to say, well, look, I'll be more modest in how she uses the Sovereignty Act, but it does mean using this act to stand up against Ottawa. And this is something that she's saying she's going to do this fall during the session, bring in some motions. We don't know how that's going to look, but the thing is, she's on a roll as well because a few weeks ago you had the Supreme Court come down and say the Impact Assessment Act, the federal act, is largely unconstitutional because it steps on provincial jurisdiction. And this is something that Smith is taking and running with, saying, hey, listen, if need be, we may be back in court, constantly fighting the federal government. We don't know if she's going to ignore federal laws. That's a problematic issue, and most Albertans, according to the public opinion polls, don't like when premiers step over the line when it comes to fighting Ottawa, but they do like the sense of a premier standing up against Ottawa. And here you have an example where the Supreme Court has supported Alberta's point of view, and now you have the Smith saying, if I have to, I'll get even tougher. And the Sovereignty Act seems like it'll be used to get back into court and force the federal government to go into court, maybe never-ending fights with Alberta. And that plays into the wheelhouse of the UCP and particularly Danielle Smith. And she's on a roll right now and becoming even more popular, according to public opinion polls.
And the Sovereignty Act was a part of yesterday's speech from the throne in the provincial legislature, but left out of that speech was the word pensions, which of course has been on a lot of people's minds in Alberta and across the country. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because she's been on pushing the pension plan, this idea that we can withdraw. And of course, Alberta can legally withdraw from the Canada Pension Plan, but she is saying, according to the report the government commissioned, saying that we can get 53% of all the assets, $334 billion out of the CPP. Big question mark against this. So even though she's pushing this, and she'll be bringing in an act to tell Albertans, if we do this, it'll go to a referendum first, to reassure Albertans who are very nervous about this. But still, she did not mention it in the speech from the throne. And this is interesting, because I think what's happening is it's still a big question mark. A lot of people are really nervous in Alberta. It's not a popular move, to say the least. Most Albertans are against the idea of our own pension plan. So she's not putting that forward in the speech from the throne, even though they will be bringing in some piece of legislation to help put this before a referendum. But the thing is, other parts of the country are pushing back. Ontario is pushing back. The federal government is pushing back, because other provinces are worried about what this could do to the whole the CPP across the country, except for Quebec, of course, has its own pension plan. But this is very divisive, very controversial, and she simply left it out because it didn't fit into the narrative that she was pushing forward in her throne speech.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Graham Thomson, good to hear from you again.
It's been my pleasure.